Order in the house, please. We will now conduct roll call.
Hast du die Liste offen?
Yeah. It's okay, you can
Just stay there.
Yep.
Okay, gut.
China?
Present.
France? Russia?
Present.
United States of America?
Present.
UK?
Present.
Iran?
Present.
Iraq?
Present.
Germany? Germany? Egypt? Italy? Somalia?
Present.
Japan?
Present.
India? Syria? Syria? Syria is present. Saudi Arabia is not present. And Amnesty International. Okay, the quorum has been reached. We are still into time against this amendment to the second degree. Yeah. Mind you repeat your speech so that the other delegates can properly answer?
Of course.
Order in the house, please.
This amendment states that that the US should offer their troops to help protect civilians and therefore the human rights. The United States does not protect civilians. Our great general, Soleimani, has been murdered by drones by the United States of America. Therefore, we do not see the point of protecting civilians while they're actually killing such a great man. So we do not think that the United States is the right country to have this influence.
Thank you, delegates. Are you open to any points of information?
Any at all.
Thank you. Are there any in the house?
Table the amendment. Second.
Table the amendment.
Mag hem even destroyen, please. Laat hem destroyen. Let me.
Motion to table the amendment.
Table the amendment.
Ja, frag die einfach.
Daniel, Daniel, laat me even
Would you
praten.
please approach the chairs?
So do I have to
Explain the...
Just come over.
the text.
Jongen, heb ik voor
Could you please explain the motion?
We'd like to table the amendment because we don't see any point in this because this is already like a goal of the United Nations on itself. So therefore,
And it means just scrap it if there's a majority.
yes.
Okay, thank you. Two-thirds majority. Dann ist zu viel, glaube ich. A qualified majority. Was heißt qualifiziert?
One effort hier für Stimmen.
F. Okay, since this motion requires a qualified majority, we're going to vote on this. Any delegates wishing to vote in favor of table the amendment, the debate, raise your plackets high now. Thank you, you may lower. With an overwhelming majority, this motion has been passed. Clapping is not in order. Okay, jetzt die, ne? Achso, the second is weg, ne? Jetzt ist jetzt hier das, oh Gott. Okay, ich muss am besten ausgraben.
Against directly.
Yeah. Okay, out in the house, please. We are again in time against this amendment. Are there any delegations wishing to speak against this amendment? Raise your plackets high now. Any objections? We will now be moving to voting procedure. Note passing is suspended. All delegates wishing to vote in favor of this amendment, please raise your plackets high now. Please raise your plackets high and clearly. You may lower. All delegates wishing to vote against this amendment, please raise your plackets high. Okay, the United Kingdom uses its veto right, so this amendment does not pass. Clapping is not in order. Okay.
Doch wirklich Fakes, ne?
Fakes, ja. Die UN Fakes. Okay, soll ich das vorlesen lassen?
Gib mir noch kurz ein paar
Ich mach dir ein Foto und
Ja.
dann können wir das mitnehmen. Von wem kam das? Iraq. We would like to call upon the delegation of Iraq to explain, to read out his amendment. Which will be displayed in a second. Yeah, it's okay.
Okay.
Order in the house, please.
Authorizes the deployment of UN peacekeeping forces to conflict areas with the primary objective of setting up enclaves that protect civilians during a conflict. The UN takes responsibility for the safety for the most threatened civilians. These enclaves don't take a side in the conflict and have the right to deter attacks of any hostile force trying to harm the enclave. Appendix A, strategic areas like industrial plants aren't part of this enclave, but the supply route, which supply food and needed medicines to the area, are opened in the forms of airports. So, by the means, but not limited to. Such as, but not limited to. Okay, honorable chairs, dear delegates, we believe that it's time to end the battle for cities. Cities are one of the most weak areas to attack. Most these cities don't actually have a strategic objective in them, and most of the time, when they're taken, it costs a huge amount of life. It costs a huge loss of life, and mostly the most casualties which result in the battle of a city, like the Battle of Stalingrad or the Battle of Berlin, are mostly civilians. We believe that it's time to put a stop to this, and we believe that the United Nations should take active action in enforcing enclaves that result in the ending of the battle for cities. We, however, believe that there should also be a limit to this resolution, like entering, for example, the Kashmir, which is too hostile for even the UN to enter, and we don't want to anger nations like Pakistan or India when they're having a fight, because we believe that if the United Nations takes active force in, for example, the Kashmir, then we will only invoke more tensions within these people that live there. Thank you.
Thank you, delegate. Are you open to any points of information?
I'm open to 2 points of information.
The delegate has opened himself to 2 points of information. Are there any such in the house? Please raise your placards high now. Seeing as there are none, we suggest you yield the floor back to the chairs.
So we yielded.
We are now in time in favor of this amendment. Are there any delegations wishing to take the floor in favor of this amendment? Please raise your placards high now. Syria, please take the floor. Rise and state your point.
In the amendment, it says the UN takes responsibility. Is it actually supposed to be takes responsibility? The third line.
Okay, yeah. Rise and state your point.
We as the delegation of Iraq also have added an appendix.
Yeah, it will be displayed in a second.
Okay.
Als die stream nu live is, kunnen ze alles horen.
To airports. Fertig? Okay, please.
Honorable chairs, dear delegates, obviously in a conflict a lot of lives are lost. And we believe by adopting this resolution we can save so many lives. It is just an amazing idea. We would like to compliment the delegation of Iraq by inventing such a genius strategy of protecting civilians. It's amazing. Thank you.
Thank you, delegate. Are you open to any points of information?
2.
The delegate has opened himself to 2 points of information. Are there any such in the house? Please raise your placards high now. Seeing as there are none, we suggest to yield the floor back to the chairs.
So yield it.
Thank you. Are there any more delegations wishing to take the floor in favor of this amendment? Please raise your placards high. Do I hear a motion to move into time against? Do I hear any objections? Do I hear anything? Thank you. Okay. Order, please. Are there any delegations wishing to take the floor against this amendment? Please raise your placards high. Okay, we will now be moving into voting procedure. Note passing is suspended. Can I help you? What's the matter? Ah, yeah. Very good. We'll now be moving to voting procedure on this amendment. Any delegations wishing to vote in favor of this amendment, please raise your placards high now. You may lower your placards. Any delegations wishing to vote against this amendment, please raise your placards high.
Motion to explain the vote of the USA as speak against
This will be granted. United States, please explain your vote.
I don't think that any UN troops need to be sent into any of these crisis areas, and I think the only possibility would be to send US troops.
Yeah.
Please refrain from using personal pronouns. Okay.
There we go.
Can I
With-
use my the veto right of the USA?
Afterwards.
Yes. Rise and state your point. Order, please. Order, please.
If the delegation of the United States happily wants to replace UN with US, they're free to add an amendment to this instead of just vetoing the entire thing.
But I can't. But the US can veto it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but since the UN is a place for debate, constructive debate, you should then hand in an appropriate amendment.
USA can add an amendment to the second degree to change the UN to US.
Since we've already voted on this, it will not possible to amend this amendment again.
But it should be possible for the US to use their veto right to stop this amendment.
Okay, you have two possibilities. First one, you can veto this amendment, or second, you can let it pass and amend it later.
The USA use their veto right.
Okay.
Motion to suspend the USA of the debate for infringing democratic rights and
What?
democratic
No.
This will be denied.
You're welcome.
Veto?
Okay.
Das war gerade voll.
So. Wir haben es jetzt S1, ne?
Ne, 2.
Ah, okay. We suggest all delegates to hand in further amendments regarding this topic. Yes? Rise and state your point.
to the House about the resolution that we have standing now?
Sure. Take the floor.
Honorable chairs, dear delegates, esteemed guests, we as the delegation of the UK are deeply saddened by the cooperation of the Security Council as it is now. We believe that nations such as, but not limited to, the USA should use their resources. They're such a rich country that has unlimited resources, one might say. And what do? Oh no, I don't like that. We don't like that one word in a resolution. Let's just scrap the whole thing. We believe, as the delegation of the UK, that this is not how the UN works, and therefore we would like not only the USA, but to ask everyone to cooperate, hand in amendments, and not to scrap them when one word doesn't appeal to them. This way we will never come further than having 2 amendments in this resolution, and this is why we are deeply saddened. And we believe that the resolution that we have now is inadequate. Thank you.
Thank you very much, delegate. Are you open to any points of information?
Any at all?
Are there any such in the House? United States, if you recognize.
The USA uses their veto right because they think that this amendment is wrong and doesn't fit. And the USA did wrote many amendments, but they didn't like no one liked them. So it's the right of the USA to use their veto.
Yes, we are aware that the USA, just as we do, has a right to veto any amendment or any resolution they do not like. However, we did not hear anything of the USA when it was time to speak against the amendment. And maybe instead of using their veto right, the USA could at first try to convince other members of the House to vote against, and then, in a situation where there's no other solution, use their veto right.
Yeah, obviously it's hard to
No open debate on the floor.
request follow-up.
Granted.
Obviously it's very hard to convince.
Please ask a question.
Is the delegate of the UK aware of the fact that it's hard to convince most of the people here, so the easiest way is to use the veto right?
Yes, we are aware. However, we think that the easy way is not always the good way, and therefore the delegate of the USA should first try to convince everyone. When the delegate will see that most of them will vote in favor, then they use the veto right. So when the delegate doesn't like something about an amendment, then they first try to tell the House what they do not like, and then they try to convince them, and then they use their veto right. Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, are there any more points in the House? Seeing as there are none, we suggest you
We would like to yield the floor to Italy, if that's
to
possible.
Italy. That is in order.
Honorable chairs, dear delegates, and the delegate of the United States of America. We have a couple of points to make here. We are quite disappointed in the attitude the United States of America has taken during this debate. And allow us to explain why. To reiterate their words they have said just a couple of seconds ago, they think that it is hard to convince the present delegates and that therefore they are allowed, of course they are, but that therefore they have the right to use their veto in order to deny an amendment which the entire Security Council has agreed upon. And we are deeply, deeply disappointed by the United States of America for abusing their rights like this, for it is the infringement of the very principles upon which the United Nations has been built. For example, democracy. We wonder if the United States of America actually understands the definition of the word democracy, for it means convincing others of your own right and then having them vote for the argument you have taken yourself. However, the delegate of the United States of America instead has refused to participate in the debate and has not handed in any amendments to the second degree whatsoever in order to make the debate work better. And yes, we do understand that the delegate has complaints about perhaps the other present delegates, and it is hard to convince us. However, that is not our problem, it's the problem of the United States of America and their responsibility to take it upon themselves in order to convince the others. If the others are not convinced by them, it is their own fault and not our fault. And therefore we would like to condemn, deeply, deeply condemn the actions of the United States of America, and we suggest the others indeed to keep on ignoring the United States of America if they refuse to otherwise comply with normal democratic principles and human integrity. Thank you.
Thank you, delegate. Are you open to any points of information?
Any and all.
United States, you've been recognized.
The United States is deeply sorry about how most of the delegates actually feel, but as because we have the veto right, we can feel free to use whenever we want, and we think that we should thank America first. So therefore, if this amendment doesn't fit the USA, we can feel free to use the veto right whenever we wish. Thank you.
We have never, first of all, what's your question?
That is true.
We didn't really see a question in that point of information.
Are you aware of the facts?
Sure. Well then, allow us to say we are aware of the fact, for we have never ever denied that the USA is not, well, does not
have the right to use their veto. It's of course their own power, and they are free to use it since they are a permanent 5 member. However, what we are saying is that the United States of America is committing acts that go against human integrity. Let us ignore world politics, let us ignore democracy, let us ignore even morals and the international humanitarian law. Let us just focus on human integrity itself. As a human, you cannot just simply deny something because you think America first. Of course, we are all here to represent our own country. Of course, we are all here to make our own country benefit from the United Nations, to benefit from cooperation, and to benefit from well, debating about international topics in order to ensure world peace and world harmony. However, just outright vetoing without having added anything to the debate, and let us stress this point multiple times, anything to the debate, not even amendment to the amendment. It is ridiculous to us how the United States of America still dares to claim.
Come to an end.
It's ridiculous to us that America still dares to claim that it's their complete right to use the veto. Although they have the right, it does not mean they should use it.
Thank you, delegate. So we suggest you yield the floor back to the chairs.
So we yield it.
Thank you. We will be entertaining one more amendment regarding this topic. So please, all delegates, consider handing in another constructive and well-thought amendment. Rise and state your point.
We're wondering what topic we're moving on with afterwards, as we had 2 topics, we believe. So what do we do tomorrow if we do the second one today?
Well, we hope that the other topic will be more constructive. So maybe we can continue tomorrow with the second topic, and if not, we are gonna rethink if we can choose maybe a third ad hoc topic.
Okay.
For tomorrow. Okay. 10 minutes for handing in another amendment. Yeah. Good. Das ist ja super. Urge all your member states to support the UN peacekeeping force by means of, but not limited to, the UN peacekeeping force with at least 1% of their military equipment. Ah. Ist gut. Ist gut. Ist gut. Ja, ich glaube schon. Julius, komm schon.
Was denn?
Der hatte keinen Bock drauf.
Ist das durch den Doppelpunkt? Ist das ein Anhängsel oder ist nicht das schon wieder ein eigener?
Urge all your states to support the peacekeeping force by means of to
Hängt ja zusammen.
providing. Ist ein A. Ist ein A.
Und hier Saudi-Arabia oder wer er ist, hat noch nichts gesagt.
Saudi
Der
Arabia.
mit dem rot-blauen, der links steht, bei der Amerika-Flagge.
Achso, ja. Wobei er ist gar nicht Saudi Arabia.
Ja, aber das andere Land war
Ja, ja. Ja, ich rede mal mit dem. Francis von Quirinus. Eva.
Really funny, like.
It's funny. He's like, he does a lot of.
Weiß ich noch nicht. Ich hab eigentlich. Ah, also das, die Nachricht von Silber nach meiner Antwort gestern fand ich aber auch ist okay.
Yeah, the problem with this topic is that I think we should be.
Ah, perfect. Yes. We have another, after this we will entertain the. Go.
But if you come up with like controversial thing on how to protect them, then you can actually debate about it. So maybe. The problem is with like things like support this and this and this. It doesn't actually say anything because you can support it and still not do it.
That's the issue. So I was like thinking that Penny was saying like you didn't bring any amendment, but
No, that's not true.
the issue is I brought like this one who were like there, but I gave this to I don't know why. Anyways, like I tried, but all the time you were always saying no, don't take this and so I don't understand you saying yes, you didn't make any. Yeah, but.
Maybe you could.
Still allowed to slightly alter my amendment or not?
You can hand in amendments if you want to.
Yeah, because I handed in this one,
Yeah.
but I want to change it slightly so that.
Yeah, okay.
makes more sense.
Yeah, because we didn't entertain it yet, you can change it now if you want to.
Okay, so I can take this?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I don't know. Like, I have no idea.
Maybe. So you're USA. You don't even have like a parliament in your own country.
Yeah, that's probably. And the problem is with like who was the other guy that this guy. And the problem is like I was trying to tell that this that somebody was like the general of them was a terrorist, but every time I was trying to ask him something, he was like no point of information for the USA. And this the thing like it was I don't know there was no.
Also wir haben ein Amendment, was gerade bearbeitet wird.
Okay, haben wir noch
Ein
eins hier?
neues, ein neues, das würde ich jetzt gerade mal schnell fertig machen. Wir machen
Ja.
das zuerst. Das kommt von Iran.
Okay.
Italy?
I think everyone from you all, you're great. Like
That's like a lot of practice, and for most of us, it's already also our third conference.
You know what they're supposed to do?
Keiner da oder was? Ja? Was weiß ich? Weiß ich nicht. Kann sein, dass keiner da ist. Ich weiß es nicht.
Nee, keine Ahnung.
Okay, dann guck danach. Die schreiben so ekelhaft, ne? Das ist ja schlimm. Past Bier kann da stehen.
Hier, das ist ein J.
Ja, jetzt aber auch ganz weit entfernt davon, das mal richtig so.
Ja, wir brauchen echt mal was Elektronisches dafür. Irgendwie eine E-Mail-Adresse pro Komitee, in die man das schicken kann.
And the following amendments going like to be from India.
This one?
This one?
No, I think they're
Yeah, and so we was just like
wondering what stage. Maybe, Chair? Is there
Yes.
an amendment handed in by India?
Bei India?
Ja, but it is chain home.
Oh, okay, it's changed. So I
Okay.
If. Schon wieder. Also ich weiß, dass da wer stehen soll
Der
wahrscheinlich, aber.
sieht echt kacke aus. Flair oder so.
Ja.
Nur Europes oder was steht da? Errors? Troops. Troops steht da.
Ja, aber stabilization will be troops of the UN and if there are no troops of the UN left.
What?
Ik heb gewoon even
Will be troops of the UN and if there are
Iran. Bitte nach vorne kommen, deswegen geschickt.
Wo ist Iran denn?
Hinten. Oder einfach laut ausrufen.
Iran? The delegation of Iran? Und nicht jetzt. Kommt jetzt?
Ja.
Ah, gut. Iran,
you have
may you
to-
please approach the chairs? Here.
It's unreadable.
Stabilization will be troops of the UN, and if there are no troops of the UN left,
Oh, sorry, I still have to finish that. Then there will be no troops.
then there will be no troops. Okay, thank you.
It's with then with an E.
Also.
Yes.
Yeah, we will entertain this after. Heute noch aufnehmen. Heute
Ja,
noch
weil
aufnehmen.
auf jeden Fall haben wir dann getestet, hier, von dem der Computer ist, der hat uns Beschluss gegeben, das Handy lag daneben, das reicht. Da hatten wir voll viel.
Ja, machen wir aber dann nochmal morgen. Dann nimm weiter jetzt auf. Also jetzt wieder aufnehmen und dann. Geht jetzt gleich sofort weiter, deswegen. Ja, dann wir rennen nach Hause. Steht vorne. Da kann das Entertain gehen.
Okay. Order in the house, please. We will continue. Von wem?
Iran.
Iran.
Steht schon vorne.
Okay, sehr gut. Order in the house, please. We will now be entertaining an amendment handed in by Iran. Iran, please read out your amendment. Okay, oh, that's good.
Honorable chairs, dear delegates, request the stabilization of weakened countries under the following conditions. Weakened countries will be countries are countries which with over 1,000 deaths in the current or past year due to conflicts or wars. Stabilization will be troops of the UN, and if there are no troops of the UN left, there will be no troops. Honorable chairs, dear delegates, we have made this amendment because of previous made amendments, and it was vetoed by the United Kingdom, and we want to make this amendment better because it was very vague and it only said we want to stabilize weakened countries. Therefore, weakened countries are countries with we recognize weakened countries with countries over 1,000 deaths, and these countries are Syria, Iraq, Libya, Afghanistan, Mexico, Yemen, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Somalia, and Kenya. And we want to offer these protection because they really need it, because of 1,000 casualties per year. We find that very concerning. And because of the debate of UN troops, I think we can all agree that these are the safest, we can all agree with that are the best troops, or the most, they're not very biased. If there are no troops left, then we need to think of more. Then we need to think of more UN troops instead of providing other troops of other countries. Thank you.
Thank you, delegates. Are you open to any points of information?
Yes, I need all.
Are there any such in the House? Please raise your placards high now. Italy, followed by UK.
To ask the delegate of Iran if they do not think that the FAP already accomplishes this problem.
We would like to remind the delegation of Italy that we want to armed conflicts was only with 25. Sometimes inconvenience happen, and at 1,000 deaths per year, then we consider it a major problem.
Request for follow-up?
Granted.
But since 1,000 deaths in a year are more than 25 deaths a year, this also falls under the statement of zones with armed conflict. Is the delegate aware of this?
Sorry, it's a bit of noise. Please rephrase the question.
Since 1,000 deaths in a year are more than 25 deaths in a year, weakened countries also fall under the term of the countries with conflict, with armed conflict zones. Is the delegate aware of this?
No, because weakened countries are there's like a gap between 25 and 1,000. There's a gap, and armed conflicts countries we think they are different from weakened countries.
We would like to remind the delegation of Italy that the amendment regarding the FAP only only applies to Oceania.
Okay. Oh yes, of course.
The delegation of Iran has mentioned that the delegation of the UK has vetoed the previous amendment. We did. This was because it was fake, as the delegation said. However, we were wondering, why didn't the delegation of Iran come up with an amendment then? And why did the delegation of Iran vote in favor of a fake amendment in the first place?
No, we would like to correct the delegation of UK. We voted against the fake amendment, and we weren't done with our amendment yet. So apologies to us.
Are there any more points in the House? Seeing as there are none, we suggest to give the floor back to the chair.
So we yield.
Thank you. Are there any delegations wishing to take the floor in favor of this amendment? UK, please take the floor.
Honorable chairs, dear delegates, esteemed guests, we as the delegation of the UK are extremely happy that the delegation of Iran, as we already said, has elaborated on this amendment, which had a good nature. We think that what the delegation has put into this amendment is very good. We like the fact that it really describes what the weakened countries are, and therefore we are in favor. We believe that the stabilization of these countries is extremely important.
Thank you, delegate. Are you open to any points of information?
Any and all.
Are there any such in the House? Please raise your placards high now. Japan, you've been recognized.
Concerning point B in the amendment, does the delegate perhaps think that we should also work on expanding the UN troops and their army?
Yes, we think that the delegation of Japan has a really good point. If the delegation likes it, we think that they should add this to the amendment. And yes, we do agree.
Okay.
Are there any more points in the House? Seeing as there are none, we suggest you give the floor back to the chair.
Motion of personal privilege.
Rise and state your point.
Can I use the bathroom?
You may.
Thank you.
Was ist denn ein friendly amendment? Wenn wir das erweitern wollen. Ja, ich sag's nur kurz. Iran, if you want to adapt the changes applied by Italy and UK,
Japan.
you may hand in a second amendment or accept this as a friendly amendment.
Oh, the delegation of Japan is already doing
Sorry.
the second.
He is?
So what's going on now?
The changes suggested by Italy. Japan, sorry. By Japan. Do you want to accept these as a friendly amendment?
There are no friendly amendments to us because it changes the nature of the class.
Okay. Good. We are still in time in favor of this amendment. Are there any delegations wishing to take the floor in favor? Please raise your plackets. Seeing as there are none, we will be moving into time against. Are there any delegations wishing to... There are no admins at the moment. Are there any delegations wishing to take the floor against this amendment? Please raise your plackets. We will now be moving into voting procedure. Note passing is suspended. All delegations wishing to vote in favor of this amendment, please raise your plackets high now. Die darf nicht abstimmen, wenn die nicht da ist, oder?
Achso, nee, dürfen wir nicht. Stimmt, wir dürfen nicht abstimmen.
Since Syria is not present, he is not allowed to vote. 12.
Das
Ist, glaub ich,
changed.
ist nicht nötig, ne?
Nee.
Since it will not change anything, we will not wait. You may lower your plackets. All delegations wishing to vote against this amendment may raise your plackets right now. Okay. With an overwhelming majority, this amendment has passed. Clapping is in order.
Gut. Unglaublich. So, nächstes. India.
Nächstes Jahr. We will now be entertaining an amendment handed in by India. India, please take the floor and explain your amendment.
Honorable chairs, dear delegates, we as the delegation of India are very concerned about the state of the UN peacekeeping troops at this point. Recently, UN peacekeeping missions have largely failed due to a lack of equipment. In order to establish a more stable peacekeeping force, we would like to indeed urge all UN member states to support the UN peacekeeping force by means of providing the UN peacekeeping force with at least 1% of their current military equipment and soldiers. We think this is a great idea because many countries have not given enough contribution to the UN peacekeeping troops. Also, we would like to step, like the other countries in this room, to follow in India's footsteps, as we already have, as we are the country with the largest contribution of troops, 240,000 in total, and we have participated in more than 49 missions, and 168 Indian peacekeepers have made the supreme sacrifice while serving in UN missions. India has also provided and continues to provide eminent force commanders for UN missions.
Thank you, delegate. Are you open to any points of information?
Any at all.
Are there any such in the House? Please raise your plackets high now. UK, you've been recognized.
The delegation of India has mentioned that some countries do not contribute as much as other countries. Will the delegation ensure that by implementing this resolution, countries will not start investing less into their military, thus they will have to contribute a smaller percent than before?
We do not see this as a threat, as
making your entire army smaller just for the sake of having a smaller contribution would seem as a very irrational decision, I would say. So therefore, we don't really see this as a threat.
Request for follow-up.
Granted.
Is the delegation aware that some countries, such as the Netherlands, for example, are wealthy and prosperous countries? However, they do have a small military. What does the delegation think about those countries? They do have a lot of money, but they don't have a big military. Thus, they will not have to contribute as much.
Well, yes, that's the decision of the country themselves. But if the delegate has any better options for making the UN peacekeeping force a stronger unit, then we very much welcome amendments to the second degree.
Are there any more points in the House? Seeing as there are none, we suggest we yield the floor back to the chairs.
So we yield it.
Thank you. We are currently in time in favor of this amendment. Are there any delegations wishing to take the floor? Germany, you have the floor.
Honorable chairs, dear delegates, the point of the UN peacekeeping force is protecting civilians and maintaining peace. But without the right equipment and amount of soldiers, the UN peacekeeping force can't do its job. It is essential to have a neutral force to protect civilians and maintain peace. But without the right means, this won't be possible. By implementing this amendment, we will come a step closer to world peace. Furthermore, we believe that it's every country's duty to support the UN peacekeeping force, so that we can finally reach a world with harmony and peace. Thank you.
Thank you, delegates. Are you open to any points of information?
Any and all.
Are there any shots in the House? Please raise your placards high now. Seeing as there are none, we currently have no admins. We hope that we get some in the future. You have to bring it by yourself. Are there any points in the House? Seeing as there are none, we suggest you yield the floor back to the chairs.
So we yield it.
Thank you.
Second degree, was das angeht. Wenn wir in favor sind, dann machen wir fertig und dann kommt das.
Okay. Are there any more delegations wishing to take the floor in favor of this amendment? Yep. Any objections? Do I hear any objections? No. Then we'll be moving into time against. Granted. Tipps sein? Das sind unsere Admins jetzt, ne? Dann rede ich mal kurz mit denen.
Ja, genau.
You have to wait a second until he has time to begin.
Komm noch.
Ja, die meinen, die wissen, wie es läuft.
Oh, das kann schwierig werden.
Honorable chairs, dear delegates and esteemed guests, we have handed in an amendment because we believe, although this is an excellent amendment by the delegation of India, we still believe it could be improved upon a little bit. First of all, we would like to change urges to demands because we believe that as a Security Council we should take matters within our own hands and make this an absolute fact rather than a possibility for these UN nations, because we believe this is of incredible importance. Furthermore, we have added a second point. The introduction of a UN fund with an obligatory fee for the UN DPO. There's not a C, it's like a bracket.
Dude.
to the United Nations Department of Peace Operations because we believe that it is necessary for UN delegates to give resources to the UNDPO, for they are an absolute necessity in the keeping of peace and world harmony. Furthermore, as a post-scriptum elaboration on this amendment, the P5 members, so China and the other ones, already have an obligatory fee they have to pay to the UNDPO, so therefore they are exempted from paying the extra taxation upon this. But this is more so for the rest of the present delegations in the Security Council to pay an obligatory fee to the UNDPO, because in our eyes it is an absolute necessity that we keep on funding this organization, this organ of the United Nations, in order to ensure world peace. Thank you.
Thank you, delegate. Are you open to any points of information? Are there any such in the House? Please raise your placards high now. Seeing as there are none, we suggest you yield the floor to the chairs. Thank you. We are now in time against this, in favor of this amendment to the second degree. Are there any delegations wishing to take the floor in favor? Japan, please take the floor.
Considering we had a bit of an issue with the armies of the USA and Russia, who could not decide who should send their army to support such countries who have these issues, we think it's very important that a neutral group based from the UN is supported and sent to these armed conflicts. We would further like to express our gratitude towards the greatness of this amendment and how everyone is able to work together on this and agree. Thank you.
Thank you, delegate. Are you open to any points of information?
Any and all.
Are there any such in the House? Please raise your placards high now. Seeing as there are none, we suggest you yield the floor to the chairs.
So we yield it.
Thank you. Are there any more delegations wishing to take the floor in favor of this amendment to the second degree? Please raise your placards. We will now be moving to time against this amendment to the second degree. Are there any delegations wishing to take the floor against? We will now be moving to voting procedure. Note passing is suspended. Admins, please take voting positions. All the delegates wishing to vote in favor of this amendment to the second degree, please raise your placards high now. You may lower your placards. Okay. Yeah, with an overwhelming majority, this amendment has passed. Clapping is in order. We will now be again discussing the amendment as a whole. Rise and state your point.
The entire amendment passes.
You are right.
Yeah.
Okay. Achso, was noch mit? Okay. Okay. We currently have no further amendments, so please. Ah, perfect. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, okay. Yeah, okay, then we'll, yeah. Du das mal. Hier Amendment 1 zu 5 streichen. Ist das noch gut?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Honorable chairs, dear delegates, we would like to change the 1% to 5% of the total army should be used for United Nations peacekeeping force. This is because the total United Nations army, the total army of the entire world, is 20,681,000. And if we only provide 1% of 1% of the army, we'd only have 206,000 people being able to help for UN peacekeeping missions. We do not think this is enough, so we increased the 1% to 5% in order to have 1 million people for UN peacekeeping forces, and that will be total of 1,034,050 people will going to be used for United Nations peacekeeping forces, peacekeeping missions. We mean, and 5% is an easy number, because if nobody wants, because 1 out of 20 is 5%.
Thank you, delegate. Are you open to any points of information?
Any at all?
Are there any shots with the House? Please raise your placards high now. Japan, followed by Italy, followed by the United States.
We understand the delegates' concern with the amount of people sent to the UN army. However, there's also a second part of the clause which states that a certain fund will be set up, and we can use this fund to expand the army as well. Is the delegate aware of this?
Yes, but at least 1%. If countries are not willing to participate, we want to raise it, and to at least 5%. Of course, countries are able to provide more, but if you have a minimum of 5%, we at least have 1 million people being able to do these missions.
Request for follow-up.
Granted.
The delegate mentioned countries not wanting to participate. However, the clause mentions that it is being demanded by the Security Council.
Excuse us for our words. We didn't like not wanting to participate. We meant with not wanting to provide more than 1%. So they will just stay with the 1%, and we wanted to increase this number. We hope that clears it up. It makes it more understandable.
We were wondering if the delegate could back up their claim that 5% is an easy number.
Let's say there are 200 people of an army, and if you have a number from 5.678 whatever percent, then this number, then people could be easily picked out, we think, and we think it's easier because it's 1 out of 20, and otherwise we would have 1 out of, or 4 out of something else.
Request for follow-up?
Granted.
Well, although it is an easy number in a sense that you can easily pick out the soldiers, it is not an easy number for delegations to accomplish, because 5%, although it may sound like a small number, is really, in reality, it is much larger than it may seem. Is the delegate therefore aware that although it may be easy to pick out, it's not easy to accomplish?
Yes, we are aware that it might be difficult to accomplish this, but we hope everyone is able, has the motivation to do so. Sorry.
United States, no? United States? You had your point?
Is the delegate aware of the fact that these countries with more soldiers would have to send way more soldiers than any other countries? That means countries like the USA, like India or China, would suffer more from this clause than any other countries, and this would harm the military of the US.
No, we do not think so, because it's in proportion. It's not talking about absolute numbers. So we say it would be unfair if we say like 1,000 people have to go there, because some countries don't even have 1,000 people, and everyone has a percentage of something.
Yeah, and I think
no open debate on the.
We're not finished yet. We think it's only fair to if you have a bigger military, you should send more troops.
Request follow-up.
Granted.
The delegation of the USA thinks that 1% of each country would be enough, as there are many countries in the UN, so that would be more than enough soldiers in total.
Could the delegate please rephrase their question?
The delegate of the USA thinks that if each country would send 1%, that would be more than enough. And we don't need 5% of the current military equipment and soldiers for each country. So we think that 1% is more than enough.
We certainly disagree with this because we don't think 206,000 people are enough for UN peacekeeping missions. Therefore, we wanted to increase this number because that's the point why we made this amendment. And we think 1 million people are way better because there are a lot of conflicts on the world, and it's not something to be underestimated. So we think at least that it should be taken very seriously, and you can at least have too many troops, then you ran out of them.
Request to follow up?
Denied. Are there any more points in the House? Russia, you've been recognized.
The delegation of Russia also thinks that 5% may be a very little number for each country. It's not, taking it in percentage, it's a lot fairer, and it may be easy, but is the delegation of Iran aware of the fact that even losing 1% of your army could, like, reducing the number could make or break a war, and the more troops you have, the more possibilities you have, and every number counts in that sense. So losing 1% was already quite a demand, and asking for 5% of each country is actually quite a lot.
Yes, we are aware, but we do not think we do not think that we do not think that every country should. Okay, wait. Let us have the opportunity to rephrase this. We don't think this is something we can just be easy about, and because on a global scale this is very important. And at the moment, we do not think if you have 95% left of your army, then there is still you can still protect yourself if a possible armed conflict arises in the country you have still 95% to protect yourself, and the chances of for a lot of countries the chances of it. We think it's better for the world, and that's not only for a country. We don't think you should look at from your own country's perspective, but from a global scale.
Request to follow up?
Denied.
Okay.
Are there any more points in the House? Amnesty International.
The delegation of Iran aware of the fact that an army with over 1 million soldiers would make the UN to a superpower?
Now we are aware of it.
Okay. Request for follow-up.
Granted.
Are you aware of the fact that this is not the original idea of the United Nations?
This might not be the original idea, but I think it's good for the world to change.
Okay. Are there any more points in the House? Seeing as there are none, we suggest to yield the floor to the chairs.
So yield.
Thank you. We are in time in favor of this amendment to the second degree. Are there any delegations wishing to take the floor in favor of this amendment to the second degree? Please raise your placards high now. UK, please take the floor.
Honorable chairs, dear delegates, esteemed guests. As we had previously mentioned, we were concerned about the small number that would go into the military. However, as the delegation of Iran has changed this percentage, we are very much in favor of this. Also, Amnesty International has mentioned that this might make the UN into a superpower. However, we do not see where this is bad, as the UN is an organization of several countries cooperating, meaning that these countries will together find a solution. And if this will help other countries on such a big scale, then we think that it's actually good that they are a superpower.
Thank you, Delegate. Are you open to any points of information?
Any and all.
Are there any such in the House? Please raise your placards high. Seeing as there are none, we suggest you yield the floor back to the chairs.
So yielded.
Are there any other delegations wishing to take the floor in favor of this amendment to the second degree? Please raise your placards. We will now be moving the time against this amendment to the second degree. Are there any delegations wishing to take the floor? Syria, please take the floor.
Honorable chairs, dear delegates, we believe 1% is more than enough. The UN has a peacekeeping force, not a ginormous army. The peacekeeping force is intended to keep, well, it's in the name, and this army would be a huge threat. A lot of corruption could be happening, and we don't believe that it's just too much.
A little side info to the House. This amendment does not state that the UN is creating an army, but that the UN peacekeeping missions are upgraded, so there will be no UN army. Are you open to...
Could you repeat it, please?
Yeah, sure. There is no current UN army, and also this amendment does not create a UN army. It just stocks up the amount of force the UN peacekeeping missions have.
Yeah, so where's the 5% going to then?
Yeah, to the peacekeeping, but this is not a UN army.
That's...
Rise and state your point.
Okay.
Are you aware of the fact that the blue helmets are the kind of army of the UN?
Yes, I'm not, but actually the blue helmets are not a UN army.
They're a UN military force.
They are contributed by several member states and are sent to keep the peace in certain places and countries, not to act as an army. Okay. United States, rise and state your point.
Are you aware of the fact that even though it's another name, it has still the same function as the UN army?
I'm sorry, but it does not have the same function as an army.
Where's Chris follow up?
Granted.
Where's the difference between that?
Kannst du mal mit gucken? No. Okay. Just a second.
The fundamental difference is that the peacekeeping forces are normally only to protect themselves and not only in the difference to a normal army from a country like the United States. They are using their army to maybe kill civilians as well as enemies, which is not one of the fundamental.
No. This is wrong. We don't kill any civilians.
Just
terrorists like the Irani general, but we don't kill normal civilians. The general was a terrorist. This is a major difference.
Okay, sit down, please. Russia, rise and state your point.
Information to the chairs.
Yes.
Are you aware of the fact that there have also been cases of there have also been crimes committed by peacekeeping soldiers under the name of the UN?
Yes, we are aware of the fact. Nevertheless, there is no UN army, and the UN has not full control of the soldiers in the peacekeeping program. They can only be sent to certain regions and countries to keep the peace, and not to like invade other countries or commit airstrikes or something. What a real army could do. So it's really just a peacekeeping force and no army. Okay. Are you open to any points of information?
Yes.
Great. Iraq.
Since this House has agreed on letting the peacekeeping forces taking more active role inside countries to keep the peace, doesn't the delegation believe that if the UN doesn't have the proper resources to actually enforce this peace, does the delegation think the UN will be even physically possible or physically able to keep the peace in countries when it's going to take a more active role?
Well, 200,000 men are more than enough to take an active role or to be the force that decides the outcome of a battle between two places and keep the peace in many nations.
Are there any more points in the House? United States?
is the delegation aware of the fact that 2 or 3% would be way more than enough for the UN army? That 5% is more than is way too much itself, especially for a state like the United States or other countries like India.
Well, we believe 1% is already enough. 2 to 3%. I mean, it would be acceptable, but it would just be too much. It wouldn't make any sense.
Request for
Granted.
So, could you repeat your statement?
1% is more than enough. That's our statement.
1%?
Yes.
Oh, then I agree with you.
Okay.
Okay. Are there any more points in the house? Right.
We would like to remind the delegation of Syria that before nations got a more active role in these peacekeeping missions. So now we have more. There's more. There were 300,000 people needed from the UN, and if we would only stick to the 1%, we would only have 200,000, and we are forgetting then that we need a more active role by peacekeeping missions. So we therefore encouraged it. Is the delegation aware of this?
Could you please rephrase your question?
At the moment, there are 300. Before we made the amendment about countries having a more active role in these peacekeeping missions. Sorry, there are 300,000 people needed, and if we would only stick with 200,000 people, how is it ever going to work?
Well, we were thinking. Well, so the delegation of, I don't remember who, mentioned that this doesn't apply to the P5 members, and the delegation of Syria is currently unaware how much percentage they are giving to the UN peacekeeping force. But for all the non-permanent members, we believe the 1% is more than enough.
Are there any more points in the house? Seeing as there are none, we suggest you yield the floor back to the chair.
So we yield it.
Thank you. Okay. We are still currently in time against this amendment to the second degree. Are there any more delegations? Do I hear any objections? Okay. So again, are there any delegations wishing to take the floor against this amendment to the second degree? Please raise your placards. Any objections? Then we will now be moving to voting procedure. Note passing is suspended. Admins, please take voting positions. Yeah.
The clause already passed.
Since the entire amendment already passed, we are only voting on the 5%. Okay. Note passing is suspended. All delegations wishing to vote in favor of this amendment to the second degree, please raise your placards high. In favor of this amendment to the second degree. 6. You may lower your placards. All delegations wishing to vote against this amendment to the second degree. Rise and state your point.
May the delegates of UK and China explain their vote decisions, please?
This will be granted. You can just stand up.
The delegation of the UK voted in favor of this because, as we already said, we were in favor of this amendment, as we were afraid that 1% simply just is not enough, and we also already mentioned that we think that it's not bad if the UN becomes a world superpower.
The delegation of China wants to encourage global cooperation by introducing a true peacekeeping force that is large in numbers and is unbiased in purpose. And we also like to point out our previous statements as that say that China is willing to donate a lot of armies and troops to the UN peacekeeping force as long as something true is done with it.
Okay. With a majority, this amendment to the second degree has not passed. Clapping is not in order. Okay. Okay. We will now be entertaining an amendment to the second degree handed in by the United States of America. Okay. We will not be entertaining this. Haben wir nichts mehr? Okay, dann frage ich mal, ob da Amendments kommen oder ob wir... Okay. Are any delegations currently working on any amendments? Or do I hear a motion to vote on the resolution as a whole? Rise and state your point.
Could we then have debate about the resolution as a whole?
Yes,
and
of course.
go for it? Okay.
Yes. So, are there any more amendments regarding this resolution? Then we will now be moving into an open debate on the resolution as a whole. Are there any delegations wishing to take the floor in favor of this resolution as a whole? Please raise your placards. Okay. First of all, we will set 3 minutes of reading time on this resolution as a whole. Thank you. Es gibt eine Motion to resume the debate. Die müsstest du dann bitte anmerken, weil wir das nicht können. Motion to resume the debate. Du brauchst eine einfache Mehrheit für. May the delegation of Iraq please approach the chairs. It's almost like, oh.
Zu wen so töten.
Since we've already closed the debate, but you could entertain a motion to resume the debate.
You need 50%.
It would take simple majority.
Okay.
Just motion to resume the debate. Well, you could leave it here. Do you want to entertain this motion? You could just ask for a motion. Okay. Ich hab doch hier mehrfach gefragt und noch einmal ins kommen. Naja. Ich meine, du könntest es trotzdem machen, aber dann brauchst du ja, wenn der Amendment einreicht.
Komisch, auch komisch.
Ja. Das ist vielleicht auch so. Jetzt fangen wir mal an mit den Prozenten zu. Okay. May the House please come to order. The reading time has elapsed. We are now in time in favor of this resolution as a whole. Are there any delegations wishing to take the floor in favor of this resolution as a whole? Please raise your placards. Italy, please take the floor.
Chairs, dear delegates and esteemed guests, we have had long discussions and debates about the subject with various obstacles in our way, which have overcome together as a united, truly united nations. And we are proud of what we have achieved today, although it's just 4 clauses, but that aside, it's still 4 good clauses. Especially, we would like to especially commend the first clause, since we believe this clause is an absolute necessity in order to ensure world peace and shall bring us one step closer towards a future characterized by beauty, by peace, by harmony, and by a future that humanity deserves, that mankind deserves. And this is, after all, our plight as world leaders in order to ensure this future that humanity deserves, in order to make this future a true reality. And this first clause is the best clause ever that would realize the ideals upon which the United Nations have been built. And therefore we believe that this should be accepted as an entire resolution in order to ensure that nothing will go wrong and that the FAP will save the world. Thank you.
Thank you, delegates. Are you open to any points of information?
Any and all.
Are there any such in the House? Please raise your placards high. Well, seeing as there are none, we suggest you yield the floor to the chairs.
So we yield.
Are there any more delegations wishing to take the floor in favor of this resolution as a whole? Please raise your placards. Any objections? Then we will now be moving to time against this resolution as a whole. Are there any delegations wishing to take the floor against this resolution? Syria, please take the floor. Okay, Syria hat kein Veto, das ist okay. Syria darf nur keine bezahlen, der ein Veto hat.
Honorable chairs, dear delegates, we have previously already expressed our concerns for the First Amendment. We don't even understand how it got here, how it was passed the first time. It baffles us. It is so extraordinary, but we can all fix this mistake by voting against the resolution as a whole. Well, thank you.
Thank you, delegate. Are you open to any points of information?
2.
The delegate has opened himself to 2 points of information. Are there any such in the House? Please raise your placards high. UK, you've been recognized, followed by Italy.
As the chairs have already clarified, this only applies to Oceania, we believe. Why is the delegate still against this?
Okay, so in Oceania, which country was affected by it again?
France.
Tahiti. Okay, so Tahiti is a sovereign nation, and you're just infringing their rights to govern themselves. It's just ridiculous.
A request for follow-up? Request?
Yes, granted.
As the delegation of Syria has showed us that he didn't even know the name of the nation that's so sovereign and can do everything on their own, why does the delegation think that he's entitled to say that they can do it on their own, as he doesn't know anything about the country itself?
Well, we know a lot about the country itself. We just forgot that was the specific nation that was being how do you state this? Being influenced by this horrible amendment.
Okay.
Point of information to the House. Since Tahiti is part of French Polynesia, and French Polynesia is already part of France, it does not really change anything.
Okay.
So.
Further built upon the comments made by the chair, it baffles us and we find it extraordinary what the delegate of Syria has said here. for their entire argument is just calling names and using big words, but they have said absolutely nothing, no argument whatsoever against the amendment. And we are absolutely, to repeat their words, baffled by this
We
comment
request
of the
a formal
Syrian
apology
delegate.
since they
So
were
allow us to-
openly mocking us.
Italy, request for formal apology.
Since it's the Security Council, we have the right to decline that, and we decline, because we have not said anything in our opinion that hurts the Syrian delegate, because we are merely repeating their own words. So allow us to move on to our actual question. Is the delegate aware of the lacking of an argument in their argument?
Could you rephrase your question? Could the delegate rephrase their question?
Please rephrase your question.
Is the Syrian delegate aware that they have not made an actual argument and have just said it is a ridiculous amendment without saying why it's a ridiculous amendment?
Well, we have obviously stated many times again that this infringes the right of a people to rule themselves. Do you want me to say it one more time so you can remember it this time?
Request for a follow-up?
Denied.
Maar we hebben het als Security Council aangenomen.
And that's in Dutch.
Dus dat maakt niks uit.
That's not an official language of the United Nations.
Order in the house, please. Are there any more points in the house?
Well, I only requested two.
That's true. So we suggest you leave the floor to the chairs. Thank you.
Point of information to the House.
Rise and state your
The
point.
Syrian delegate has said that Dutch is not an official language. However, we would like to remind the delegate that there is no official language of the UN. Thank you.
The official language of MUN is English, so please refrain from using Dutch.
But you're supposed to
Thank
roleplay as actual UN delegates.
Yeah, so you're speaking Dutch as an Italian delegate. Yes, Dutch roots.
Order please, order please. United States. Are there any more delegates wishing to speak in favor of this amendment? No, sorry, against this amendment. Against this resolution as a whole. United States, you have the floor.
We do think that this resolution has some good points, but because of the first amendment, we cannot let this resolution pass. And Italy was always saying that we are looking for democracy and humanity, but then taking the sovereignty of some countries just whenever they wish is something wrong, so we cannot let this resolution pass. And I'm open for any point of information.
Thank you, delegate. Are there any such in the house? Please raise your placards high.
Come on.
Yeah, Germany followed by India,
just two,
followed
just
by
two.
Just two?
Yeah, for sure.
It's too late, it's too late. Followed by Iran, followed by Syria, followed by UK. Without follow-ups.
Thank you.
We question why the delegate of USA is against this particular clause, since they were in favor of all amendments when they were presented.
I was not in favor of the first amendment, or maybe I was, but I didn't notice that this was. Yeah, that could be true. But now afterwards, we still have the opportunity to stop this resolution, and if the USA wishes, it can use its veto right, like they used it before, and I think no one has a problem with it.
We have the question why the delegate of the United States thinks this is from the side of Italy, that this is that Italy is not following democratic rules, and that they're indeed infringing in other people's democracies, while Italy actually gains nothing from this.
Still, Italy was one of the countries who wished to have this amendment and highly recommended it and said that it would be helpful, but still had no problem with taking the sovereignty of other countries. And then afterwards, after the USA was trying to get one amendment on the resolution, he was shouting and saying, yeah, humanity and democracy and so on, but had no problem with taking the sovereignty of other countries. And this is confusing me.
Denied.
Thank you.
delegation of Iran instructed us first, and now you're stating that they're voting against this resolution, while they actually, as previous points have been have stated that they now will be voting against the resolution. So we are questioning the reliability of the United States of America. Is the delegation aware of this? Since the delegation has very different ideas about the same topic, we're questioning the United States of America's reliability. Are you aware of this?
No. Why should you wonder about this? Because we agreed on many of the amendments, but still, if there's an amendment that doesn't fit the USA can use the veto right to stop it.
Is the delegate of the USA aware that besides the differences and strained relationship between the USA and Syria, that we would like to compliment the USA for having such an open mind and listening to the debate going on, and perhaps being persuaded by the delegation of Syria to change their opinion on the first clause?
What's the question?
Well, I said, are you aware of this at the beginning of my question?
No open debate, please.
Are you aware of this?
First of all, we would like to say to the whole House that a delegate can always change their mind, so we were not questioning that. What we do question, however, is, as the chairs have pointed out twice now, we believe, it doesn't really change anything, the first clause. Therefore, it doesn't make a difference whether it's in the resolution or not. So, why is the delegate next to the first clause against this resolution, as the first clause is irrelevant?
The delegation of the USA is against the first clause as with this first amendment, some countries lose their sovereignty, like France gained a new colony, we think, and therefore taking the sovereignty of other countries is wrong and shouldn't be. There shouldn't be any debate about this, because each country has the right to rule themselves. So it's obvious that this resolution can't pass with this amendment in it.
Denied, sorry.
Thank you. The floor is yielded.
Thank you. Are there any more delegations wishing to take the floor against this resolution as a whole? Please raise your placards.
Could you repeat?
Against this resolution. You have already made a speech.
Yeah.
Okay, gut. Ich jetzt abstimmen, ne? Scheiße, ich will aber nicht. Do I hear a motion to move into voting procedure? Okay. We will now be moving to voting procedure on this resolution as a whole. Note passing is suspended. Admins, please take voting positions. All delegates wishing to vote in favor of this resolution as a whole, please raise your placards high now. You may lower your placards. All delegates wishing to vote against this resolution as a whole, please raise your placards high.
Can the USA use the veto rights?
Granted.
The USA did
Rise, please rise.
The USA did explain the veto right a few seconds ago, and the USA doesn't have to explain anything, and they did explain 4 times. So we think using our veto right if something is so stupid like the First Amendment is absolutely.
Point of information to the USA. Point of information to the House USA. Anyone?
Rise and state your point.
As we have said, we think 10, 20 times. The First Amendment doesn't do anything, and we have asked the USA whether they are against anything else in the resolution. They said no, only the First Amendment. However, as the First Amendment doesn't do anything, why are they using their veto rights on a resolution that is approved by the whole House, except for the USA?
The USA did notice that the First Amendment didn't change anything, so we won't use our veto right. So come on.
What is? Okay, we will be voting again. All delegates, order please. Order please. All delegates wishing to vote in favor of this amendment as a whole, please raise your placards high. In favor. You may lower your placards. All delegates wishing to vote against this resolution as a whole, please raise your placards high. Granted. Syria, please explain.
Okay, so what do you want me to explain further than I've already said more than like 5 or 6 times?
Please refer from using personal pronouns. Syria, please no personal
delegation
pronouns.
of Italy? We can't comprehend what's going on.
Right of replies is
No.
We would like the delegation of Italy to please get this reply granted, since we just don't understand.
You have no.
Italy, please explain your motion.
We can't comprehend. It completely baffles us. We are stunned. We are stunned by the words of Syria. It's ridiculous what they are saying. Absolutely nonsensical and weird, and it doesn't make any sense, and it baffles us, and so forth and so forth. Thus, the delegates of Syria finally realize the argument they have been making all along, since we have repeated their exact words, and they have never said anything substantial before this, or any sort of argument, and they are looking as though I am saying something nonsensical right now. However, we can ensure the delegate that they have not said anything substantial at all, nor provided any argument for their side.
What about infringing the right of people to govern themselves is not a correct argument?
Request for a follow-up?
Denied. Please sit down.
Okay, so
order in the house, please. Syria, Italy, India. Order in the house, please. Order in the house. With an overwhelming majority, this resolution has passed. Clapping is in order. Viertelstunde?
Ja, Viertelstunde. Ja, bis 5 nach.
Order, please. We will conduct a break. Syria and Italy. Order, please. We will conduct a break for 15 minutes. Make sure to be here. Ergebnisse.
Hm?
Endlich mal Ergebnisse. Das hat lange genug gedauert.
But there's no Israel here.
I'm not bullying people, yes. It's awesome. Yeah, the issue was like, I was really scared to say anything. Still, like, all the people are, that's how, it doesn't matter. Yeah, but it was other people, and other people, yeah, I know, but still, people, there's most important. Yeah, but you can relate that this is made of like, for me, like, I don't know. Playing games really, yeah.
Where are the chairs?
In front of the 200 people. Wow, I've got a question for the upcoming topic. Say no, kill him.
Ja, oder wir machen jetzt USA-Iran und können das dann, wenn wir jetzt, weil das Was macht Syrien da?
Syrien ist einfach.
Syria? We will continue. Good. We will continue. Okay, order in the house, please. Since we've already finished a resolution on the first issue, we will now do a little side topic, because the US-Iran conflict is reserved for tomorrow. So our topic for now will be dissident journalism and prisoners of conscience. We will set reading time and lobbying time for 15 minutes in committee. Yes. 15 minutes. Ja, das Splitten ist unnötig. Ist ja nicht so gewesen. Ist jetzt sofort. Aber ich denke, die meisten wissen ja, wer hier so kritisch gegenüber Journalismus steht. Ja, das stimmt. Ägypten haben wir auch. Das ist gut. Ja, in Ägypten, ja.
Das ist ja gut, dass ich sogar da stehen lasse, aber ich habe gerade nicht rausgekommen.
Nein, ist gut, ist gut. Okay, dann halb, ne?
Ich erkläre den Hintergrund, was jetzt überhaupt gerade los ist.
Ach so, ja.
Do we have lobbying time now?
Yes, you have lobbying time now.
Ihr wisst sicher, was ich meine.
Wil iemand Saudi-Arabië switchen? Alleen moet iemand Saudi-Arabië zijn. Does someone want to be Saudi-Arabia? Dat zou echt leuk zijn. Daniel? Doe het.
Otherwise, it's luckily because we didn't notice it.
Als je Saudi-Arabië bent, deel het. Omdat Saudi-Arabië is dat lijkt een soort van country zijn.
Afgelopen jaar. Maar sinds het wel.
China heeft geen definitieve nummers.
Was denn? Nur auf Deutsch? Ne, das heißt dann anders. Also so groß nicht. Nein.
Das wäre, finde ich, für mich besser. Also ich weiß schon ein paar Sachen, so ein bisschen Hintergrundwissen habe ich.
Ja.
Aber das Problem ist so auf Englisch, ich krieg's
Ja,
gar
kann ich
nicht.
verstehen. Aber das gibt's nicht in so groß. Das gibt's höchstens mal im Unterricht, im Sovi-LK oder so.
Ja, ich hab Sovi-LK.
Ja, dann?
Aber selbst da machen wir gar nichts.
Echt nicht? Das ist aber schade.
Wir machen nur das deutsche System, Parlament, alles, was die Funktion davon ist, sowas.
Okay.
Brexit gerade aktuell. Mehr nicht.
Na gut. Schade. Schau mal gerade, was wir hier
Als je weet niet wie Ben is. Dat is een oranje hartje. Hij kan alles horen wat we zeggen, zelfs in thuis. Messi, hij heeft hem open hoor. Messi, hij heeft hem open.
Nassim, hij beslist gewoon om jou te negeren.
Ja.
Want hij is een strong, independent.
Nee, wir hatten noch gar nichts. Was denn? Süßigkeiten. Ja, das stimmt.
Gibt's Milch?
Frau Renz schon.
War die Zeit oder geht's weiter?
Es geht weiter in 5 Minuten. Ja.
Ja.
Ben, you see this. Ben, film this. Can you accept this, Ben? Put them. Switch the camera to them. Switch the camera to Syria. Make him the main focus on Syria.
ging ja drum. Ich frage ob wir die Gossipbox heute schon machen. Also. Okay, brauchen wir einen Rollcall oder sind wir da? 2, 3, 4.
Or vielleicht Order in the House and Italy, please put back the microphone.
Order in the house, please. Italy, put back the microphone. Thank you. So, fehlt jemand? Rechts fehlen noch einige, oder?
Ja, nee. Die wissen doch, da geht es.
So. Wow. Oh, Digga, die Rahmenprofil ist umgekippt. Was ist? Ah. Order in the house, please. Order. We will now commence debate regarding the topic of dissident journalism and prisoners of conscience. Will any delegates please submit their amendments? Are there any amendments? Any objections?
Objection.
Okay. Since the United States want to write an amendment, then please write the amendment.
No problem. Objection, objection.
What? No. Until you're finished, and then you can go.
But then we have to be quiet.
Then United States, please hurry. Please hurry up.
Okay, let's sit here in silence for the Claire War.
Ben, focus the camera on the USA.
Oh ja.
Topic 2.1.4. Ja. Dissident journalism and prisoners of conscience.
Wat denk je van toen zelf? Nood.
Yes.
So, was habt ihr jetzt am letzten Mal? Okay. Schlossen? Nee, ich glaube nur Open Debate, nicht Open Debate.
The orange, the redhead boy in green. Red hair. No. The one in the through the door.
Italy, please do not send notes to our technical support. Thank you.
It's already been done.
Too late now.
Ben, please respond. ASAP. Ja, we gaan ze gewoon voorlopen als experts op de top. Ja.
Thank you. Oké, ik zal nog
Dat moet we Saudi-Arabië hebben. Pak ze.
Ja.
Crisis start. Saudi-Arabië, Ben vermoord.
Ben. Ben Japan.
Ja, hij zegt beschaamd.
Nee.
Op een gegeven moment gingen we ook achter die kamer kijken en toen zagen we ze eerst.
Ja, je hebt een kost maken.
Ich glaube, auch in der Welt kann man für und gegen gleichzeitig, weil wir haben ja jetzt für und gegen. Also die sammeln dann auch.
Ben,
es gibt welche, die sagen, ja.
No. Ben, will you order pizza tomorrow again?
Ja, ich glaube, hier geht es darum, dass man gegen eine Resolution oder ein Amendment spricht. Also wie es hier steht.
And I want a large pepperoni.
As your head delegate, I command you to give me a slice of pizza. He's my
Okay, ich mache ein
co-delegate.
Foto und er soll vorstellen, ja?
Right, Ben? Right? Don't do anything if you agree.
Oder?
Wat er is gedaan?
Hij is mijn co-delegate geworden. Officieel.
Justify. Ben, if you knock right now 5 times, you are no longer my co-delegate. Thank you, Ben.
Ich mache ein Foto.
If you knock 230 times in a time span of 5 seconds.
Ben, are you smiling?
Order, please. Order, please. May the United States please come to the front and explain their amendment?
Starting already, United States was not.
You have to speak. Okay,
That's what you want.
What is honk?
Order, please. Order, please.
Recalls the Geneva Convention of 12th August 1949, in particular the Third Geneva Convention of 12th August on the treatment of prisoners of war, and additionally shielding the rights of journalists, especially the right to write and express their opinion without all influence, as stated in the Protocol of 8 June 1977. That's it.
Thank you, delegates. It will be displayed in a second. Okay.
Should I yield the floor?
Are you open to any points of information?
Yes.
Are there any starts in the house? Please raise your plackets high. United Kingdom, followed by Iraq, followed by Egypt.
Yes, the United Kingdom think that this is a good amendment. However, we were wondering what the actual operative nature of this amendment is, as it is recalling, so not doing anything, with a previous convention. Doesn't the delegate agree that it might fit in the preambulatory clause of the resolution instead?
Yes.
Okay.
It's come to our attention that the delegation of the United States of America is proposing to really open up their journalism. But we actually saw a few months back that his president, the president of the United States of America, had a lot of critique to a certain news network, CNN to be precise. And we want to ask a couple of questions, or just question the delegate's opinion about the recent statements that President Trump has put forward against different news networks instead of just relying on the sole news network of Fox.
Well, it's quite difficult to give an opinion on that topic, and all I can say is that I agree to everything that Donald Trump says.
What? Point of information to the House.
Rise and state your point.
We furthermore would like to elaborate on the point made by the United States of America, that it is complete if the news networks have the right to express their opinion, then so does Trump. So it does not make any sense to point fingers to Trump, because Trump is pointing fingers to news networks. It does not make any sense. It's contradictory in nature, so therefore it is an invalid point.
No.
Can I
Thank
rise
you,
to
Italy.
state my
Please sit
point?
down. Are there any more points? Egypt.
Motion to make a statement to the House.
Sorry?
To make a point of information. Motion to make a point of information to the House.
Rise and state your point.
We actually do that. I think that is valid critique because President Trump actually called certain news networks fake news, while actually putting certain news networks on how do you call it actually, like how do you call that again? Like yeah, he prioritized Fox News over others, and he actually called other certain news networks which he didn't agree with fake news. So we would like to elaborate him on that, and I don't think that's not a valid argument.
Can you repeat the last part of your sentence?
The fact that your president is actually like putting forward or like prioritizing Fox instead of other news networks like CNN or NBC or the other news networks, and just choosing one which he thinks that's the good news and the other and decides that other news networks are bad. And we would like you to comment on that.
Well, I think the delegation of USA thinks that this decision was right and that whatever Donald Trump decides is the best decision. Ich kann nicht Donald Trump sagen.
Egypt.
We would like to remind the delegate that while this amendment states that civilians journalists will be protected when they express their opinions, we were wondering whether the delegate agrees that if journalists write their opinion as if it is a fact and therefore try to portray beautiful countries such as Egypt in a negative way, that this should be punishable by jail time or even death.
Well, so you mean that if any of the journalists says something wrong, then he should be punished? Or?
If a journalist writes or says something that is portrayed as a fact, even though it is an opinion, this does not fall under this amendment or even under the law that the delegate is referring to, and therefore it can be punishable by imprisonment or by death.
Then, of course, he can be punished, but not be killed. Or this you just said that you should be killed. No, this for sure. No. We are living in a democracy, so killing people just because they express their opinion is a big mistake.
Thank you, delegate. Are you open to any more points of information?
Yes.
Are there any more points?
Is the delegate of the United States aware that his country does allow the death penalty, and therefore it is very strange for him to say that simply killing people is in no way acceptable?
No, the delegation of the USA means that killing people just because they express killing journalists just because they express their opinion is a mistake. But first of all, if the USA kills anybody, then this punishment is absolutely understandable, and mostly it is when these people kill other people, so it's not any journalist who gets killed because he expresses his opinion.
So we suggest we move the floor back to the chair. Thank you. Yeah. We are currently in time in favor of this amendment. Are there any delegations wishing to take the floor in favor? Please raise your placards high. United Kingdom, you have the floor.
Honorable chairs, dear delegates, we as the delegation of the United Kingdom will be speaking in favor of this clause because although, as we already mentioned, there is not really an operative nature of this clause, we still think that it belongs in the resolution. Doesn't matter to us whether it's a preambulatory or an operative clause. We wanted to remind the House that the United States does have a free press, and that's one of the principles of democracy. However, so is questioning the press. And if Mr. Trump wants to question the press, that's his right to do so, and therefore we do not see why he was wrongfully attacked. Next to that, we'd like to say that if, for example, the delegate of Egypt has an idea about installing the death penalty, he should not be asking this to another delegate, he should be writing an amendment on it. That's all we have to say, thank you.
Thank you, delegate. Are you open to any points of information?
Any and all.
Are there any such in the House? Please raise your placards high now. Seeing as there are none, we suggest you yield for the chairs.
So yielded.
Thank you. Italy, you have the floor.
America for handing in this amendment, and we would also like to comment on a couple of other delegates' remarks. First of all, the comment made by the delegate of the United Kingdom. They have said that this clause is not operative in nature. However, we would like to remind them that recalling is in fact an operative clause and is therefore completely applicable and therefore valid as an operative clause. For recalling a certain convention merely puts more focus upon this convention again, which helps delegates remind rules that have been made in the past, that have been agreed upon in the past. We would also like to respond to the delegation of Iraq for saying that, for blaming the United States of America's president, they have been pointing fingers to news networks and preferring one over another. And although we do agree as well that this may be quite undemocratic and perhaps not really the right way to do things, not really the right way to solve this problem, we must still say that Trump pointing fingers to certain news networks is also completely illegal, since lying or perhaps preferring one network over another, even if this is out of political ideology, is not illegal in any way or disproved by the United Nations, and therefore we have no right whatsoever to condemn other nations about this. Thank you.
Thank you, delegate. Are you open to any points of information?
Any and all.
Are there any such in the House? Please raise your placards high now. Iraq, you've been recognized.
With the delegation of Iraq never said it was illegal to point fingers to any news network which the Donald Trump has actually called fake news, but we actually want to express our opinion that things are not right over there.
Well, allow us to elaborate on our point then. We didn't mean to say that Iraq said it was illegal. We merely said it isn't illegal, so it doesn't really matter whether you make a point about it or not. And what we mean by this is, yes, it might be quite undemocratic. However, it does not really matter, for it is happening, and the delegation of Iraq sadly has nothing to do with it and can't do much about it. And although we do not like it as well, we do not think it is an acceptable way of doing things, it is still completely invalid to bring up this point and call the United States of America hypocritical simply because they've brought in a point that's otherwise a very good point. So yes, we can agree that the United States of America might have been a bit hypocritical by amending this amendment. However, it's still a good amendment and it does not change the nature of the amendment, and therefore we still think it should pass.
Are there any more points in the House? Seeing as there are none, we suggest you yield the floor.
So we yield it.
Thank you. Are there any more delegations wishing to speak in favor of this amendment? Please raise your placards high.
Second.
Any objections? So we will now be moving to time against this amendment. Are there any delegations wishing to speak against this amendment? Please raise your placards high. Egypt, please take the floor.
Honorable chairs, dear delegates, as mentioned in the previous statement by the chairs, Egypt, Saudi Arabia and China are amongst the world's leading countries in imprisoning and executing journalists. The delegate of the USA is referring to the third clause of the Geneva Convention. However, none of the three countries I just mentioned, so Saudi Arabia, China or Egypt, have signed this. For this, meaning that the journalists will not be protected in either of all three of those countries, and therefore we think that this recalling this convention is actually kind of useless, considering that the countries that are participating in imprisoning and executing the journalists do not have anything to do with the third convention. Thank you.
Thank you, delegate. Are you open to any points of information?
Any at all.
Are there any such in the House? Please raise your placards high. UK, you've been recognized.
Is the delegate aware that recalling the convention doesn't mean that it will be exactly the same? Recalling means that the delegation can look over this convention and what they decided then, which is to remind the delegate a long time ago, and now they can see maybe that perhaps it is better to change their opinion that they previously made.
We are aware of this. However, we are not sure whether we would want to change our opinion on this, considering that a lot of the media spread about our countries is not in fact true. and therefore we do not want these journalists to be able to spread libel about our beautiful countries under protection of other countries.
Request for follow-up?
Granted.
Then, if the delegate decides so, which is his opinion, doesn't the delegate think that the other delegates at least should have the chance to recall this convention as said so? Because as the delegate said, it's every delegate will interpret it on his own.
Sorry. Yes, we think that every delegate should have their own say.
Request for last follow, very short.
Granted, but very short.
Then, if the delegate agrees that every delegate should have his own say, then why is he preventing other delegates from recalling the convention?
We are not trying to prevent other delegates from recalling it. We are, however, trying to stimulate and motivate other delegates to realize that this amendment is in fact not good.
Are there any more points in the House? Seeing as there are none, we suggest you refer back to the chairs. Thank you.
Motion to move the voting procedure.
Second.
Any objections? So we will now be moving to voting procedure on this amendment handed in by the United States of America. Note passing suspended. All delegates wishing to vote in favor of this amendment, please raise your placards high now. You may lower your placards. All delegates wishing to vote against this amendment, please raise your placards high.
I have no free press. You must just recall it.
Motion to explain the veto of China.
Granted, please explain.
I just wait until the moment.
Yeah.
The delegation of China believes that this clause be useless in a resolution and that pressing that demanding attention to such a ridiculous clause would make us, how can I say this? This clause is simply useless in this resolution, and we believe that it doesn't belong into finding a solution to a problem that not all parties agree on, and it just states useless facts. It's not even a real operative clause.
Thank you, China. Since China vetoed on this amendment, it will not pass. Clapping is not in order.
Motion to entertain our amendment.
Yours will be entertained after this one.
We will now be entertaining an amendment handed in by Russia. Russia, please take the floor.
So, the delegation of the Federation of Russia suggests that countries withdraw their journalists from countries which don't approve having used companies of other countries within their own country. And it would have the effect of the journalists being out of the danger zone, and as well, we do have to respect the choices of other countries, and just to be fair, that's what we should do. Yeah.
Thank you, delegate. Are you open to any points of information?
Any?
Are there any such in the House? Please raise your placards. Egypt, followed by Italy, followed by the UK.
How does the delegate feel about recalling the journalists that are in countries that do approve of having these journalists there, unless they are trying to spread fake news? I would say, first of all, we can't directly say whether or not it's fake news. It's always hard to kind of for the most important part is countries that do approve having journalists of others in their country that spread fake news officially said, kind of. Isn't it their own choice to have those journalists in their country? Where would be the problem? Is there any, if they say it's okay, what should there be to? A request for follow-up?
Granted.
is the delegate talking about countries that do approve of journalists but do not approve of the fake news, or is the delegate talking about countries that do approve of journalists and don't mind any news spread at all?
It's just approving that the journalists are, like, it's actually an independent thing, I believe. It doesn't necessarily. I believe the reason why or why not you don't want to have journalists in your country is not interesting for, like, it's not interesting in the end to know why they don't want to have them inside, whether it's because they spread fake news or they, yeah.
Does the delegate not think that this amendment will create a wall for governments to just be as corrupt as they want to be without ever having have the opportunity to be exposed and to have the truth come out, since they can also control their own national news agencies? And now that we also are blocking international news agencies from bringing the truth to light, this will create a safe wall for these corrupt governments to do however they please without having to fear the truth coming out to light and being, well, condemned because of it. What does the delegate think of this?
Regarding how globally connected we are right now with internet and social media and stuff, it's very, I don't believe it's possible to actually hide something. Like we had it in around October and November, Iraq. There was a conflict in Iraq about I don't remember what it was about exactly, but there were conflicts, and Iraq also tried to hide them. So they actually did stop news and tried to create that kind of wall you're talking about. But very short after, news were spread around the world, not by journalists in specific, but more by actually individuals who use social media to raise awareness, and that's completely different. It's different than having journalists of other countries acting as spies, basically.
Request for a follow-up?
Yes,
Granted.
Is the delegate aware that there are also delegations which block internet usage and make it so that all traffic of the internet remains within their own country, remains within the boundaries of their own country? If we, for example, take a look at China, not to say any names or anything, everything in China is completely regulated. You cannot send anything in China that will go out of China. So although the delegate may be claiming that the population will eventually publish it on the internet, this is no guarantee whatsoever. And just because one incident happens to be published on the internet, although the government may have wanted to hide it, this does not mean that many countless other incidents will be will not be hidden properly.
That's absolutely true, but I don't believe that having journalists in other countries would guarantee that we find out all the secrets a country has. Therefore, I don't think journalists will find out more than an individual who has, like, first of all, the more common knowledge about, like, the situation and actually lives in the situation themselves than someone who only has the opportunity to ask people and do online research, for example.
Request for a very short follow-up?
Denied. Denied.
The delegation said that it fears for the safety of the journalists and that the people are much better at exposing what happens in a country. However, the delegation of the UK was wondering, doesn't the delegation agree that journalists, it's their job to find out what's going on and to publish this? And people might fear for their safety as they are not familiar with bringing out things into the world. So doesn't the delegate agree that it's actually much safer, because the journalists know what they are doing, to have journalists in other countries expose things about the country than its own people, because the journalists will still be protected by their own country, whilst the people living in the country that is exposed do not have anyone or anything backing them up?
To the delegation of Russia, what the delegation of the UK said makes absolute sense. But as for now, I don't. The delegation of Russia doesn't see how to protect the journalists from how to protect the journalists in other countries without invading the country themselves, which would be another problem because, yeah.
Request for follow-up.
Granted.
So the delegation of the UK would like to remind the delegation of Russia that a journalist from country A going to country B will be backed up by country A because he or she is a citizen of country A. And if someone in country B publishes something about country B who lives there, then they are not protected by anyone or anything. So that's why we would like to ask the delegation of Russia if they do have changed their opinion on their clause.
We have. Since there are no other points of information,
I think there are.
There are?
United States. Okay, so we suggest we give the floor to the chairs.
Yes.
Thank you.
Motion to table the amendment.
Objected.
Objection.
So.
Can I use the ball, please?
Enjoy yourself.
Gast, Ruben. Ga even naar de plaats toe. Takes lines of cocaine. That's why
The delegation of the UK is writing an amendment.
Like his own hero into.
Okay.
Well, motion to move into time against then, since.
She's almost finished.
Ja, maar je kan ze sowieso pas alleen in time against inleveren. Motion to move into time against.
Second.
Any objections?
Second.
Then we'll
Second.
be moving the time against. And we will. Yeah.
Well, before we move, ik wil eerst even gaan een tegenspeech geven.
What?
No. Als kijk al die briefjes voor de kosten. Het is echt 94. Als kijk deze gozer. Is dat normaal? Ik ga, nee, dat is best goed. Ik ben niet, ik wil.
Nee, wacht. Ik moet echt alleen maar.
Maar ik wil nu echt helemaal niet zitten doen. Even serieus. Ik moet gewoon met jullie blijven wachten tot we naar huis gaan. Dat is het enige waarom we hier zitten. Ja, oké, zie maar. Dit kan. Ik moet blijven helemaal niet zitten.
Ja. En dan boeit dat morgen
Of China.
het museum helemaal de grond in gooien.
Ingooien. Ja, dat is corona.
Ik ga je ook helpen.
Zeg als de truth van USA uit te vangen en uit
Ja. Ik deed ook een agreement.
Julius. Hier gewoon nog een ronde.
Good and cute couple.
No, wait.
Oh nee.
Ah, oké.
When will you marry? Ze zijn helemaal niks. Dat had ik ook vorige jaar. Mr. Elder.
Yeah, Mr. Elder is a fool.
Mr. Elder. He's located in Baltimore.
Yeah.
Daniel, geef het tegen Ben, wie moet dit? Hoeveel procent is die? 100. Nee, 82. Naar wie moet die? Mag ik er één als diplomatic tool?
Dus jij hebt zin in, hè?
Ja, weet ik, ik ga ze niet opeten. Ik gebruik het als diplomatic tool. Wat dan? Ik ga ze gewoon sturen naar andere comments.
Verstop het in een papiertje.
Ja, dat is een heel goed plan. Ik ga gewoon zo. Dus ga het controleren. Staat op de sleuteltje nog bij.
Honorable chairs, your delegates, esteemed guests, we as the delegation of the UK have proposed an amendment to the second degree on this amendment because we think that the delegation of Russia did have good intentions with this amendment. However, he perhaps might not have formulated it in the right way. That's why we would like to assist. So what the amendment says now is will impose great danger on the journalists and their lives. By this, we are not saying that the journalists have to be withdrawn. However, countries should advise these journalists and make them aware of the fact that they are in dangerous situations, and perhaps these journalists will change their minds as they will now know what's coming for them. We think that this is a good amendment because it literally keeps people safe, and that's what we're here to do for. So that's why we hope you will all vote in favor. Thank you.
Thank you, delegates. Are you open to any points of information?
Any and all.
Are there any such in the house? Please raise your placards. Yes, rise.
Doesn't the delegation of the United Kingdom think this is already a generally known thing that if you send a journalist to, for example, a country like Saudi Arabia, there are certain dangers that can be accounted for. So, isn't it already like a known fact?
We understand the concern of the delegation of Saudi Arabia. However, countries change and develop over time. So countries that at this moment might not be dangerous for journalists, it can switch in days. And therefore we think it's important that countries keep their journalists up to date about the safety risks that apply for certain nations. And even though it might be a general fact, we still think that general facts are also important to include in the resolution, as some people might forget.
Are there any more? Egypt?
Does the delegate not agree that the journalists are not in danger because of the country that they are in, that they are rather in danger because of the situation that they put themselves in by spreading news that is untrue, or they're trying to hurt the reputation of a country, which is why they bring themselves in danger, actually?
No, the delegation of the United Kingdom does not agree at all. We think that journalists do their job, and the job of journalists is to spread real news, and they can know what news they spread. However, it is certainly not their fault. These are risk takers that go to other countries to inform us about them, and we think that's all great. And we have absolutely no empathy towards Egypt's point.
Are there any more points? Seeing as there are none, we suggest you yield the floor to the chairs.
So we yield it.
Thank you. We currently have no admins.
You have to bring it by yourself.
It's intercompany.
What is it?
It's for another
And you have to bring it to us anyway.
We are currently in time in favor of this amendment to the second degree. Are there any delegations wishing to speak in favor of this amendment? Please raise your placards.
No, this cannot be granted. No, but you can eat it by yourself. And you can give it after the conversation. Sit down, please. Please sit down.
Any delegations wishing to speak in favor of this amendment to the second degree, please raise your placards.
Second.
Any objections? So we'll be moving the time against this amendment to the second degree. Are there any delegations wishing to take the floor? Italy, please take the floor.
It is in our opinion that both the original amendment and the amendment to the second degree both serve no, but it's Security Council, so you're allowed to skip that technically.
Since it is MUN law, I have to stick to this.
Honorable chairs, dear delegates. We are against both the original and the second degree amendment, and therefore we would like to suggest that we both vote against both amendments, and allow us to explain why. We would like to ask the United Kingdom, we'd like to comment on the United Kingdom, that do they not think that nations will put external journalists from other countries in danger on purpose in order for the other nations to withdraw them from their countries so that the truth cannot be exposed? So is the delegate not indirectly actually endangering the lives of these journalists to an even greater extent by letting this amendment pass? And furthermore, we also suggest everyone to vote against the original amendment because withdrawing journalists from other nations that may not be your own is just against the very principles of journalism and as such the principles of the United Nations.
Thank you, delegates. Are you open to any points of information?
4.
Ratified since the delegation has been to the nation. And the delegation delegation of the UK would like to clarify that we do not believe that we're putting the journalists in greater danger. And we would like to say to the delegate of Italy that by implementing this amendment, journalists will be up to date. And no, we do not think that countries will put journalists in more danger than before, as they already are in big danger sometimes. And if countries will do so, then the other countries will notice and they will act on that. So we do not understand why it is a point that has to do with this amendment to the second degree.
Although we appreciate that the delegation of the United Kingdom still holds such naive and innocent beliefs about the intentions and the capabilities of other nations, we would like to remind them how slew other nations can be in committing crimes, but under a hidden guise. And we believe that a nation that does not wish their truth to be exposed will go to any length in order to do this without being noticed legally, so to speak. So therefore we believe that it's just an innocent hope, a wish, a pipe dream the United Kingdom is expressing here, and it's not something that is realistically possible.
Are there any more points in the House? Egypt, you've been recognized.
Considering the fact that the delegate of Italy says that they are going to vote against this amendment, but also the original amendment, which states that countries have to recall their journalists from countries that do not want them there. And also take into account that not all countries have signed the Third Convention of Geneva, which states that journalists are protected. Does the delegate of Italy not actually believe that every country that did not sign the treaty should have the right to imprison or execute the journalists, considering that they are not protected and the delegate is against recalling these journalists?
Although they may legally possess the right to do so, we still believe that, and we know we might sound a bit hypocritical now, for we will express a pipe dream of our own. We believe in human integrity, and that nations will actually go to a certain extent in order to not execute those who wish to bring truth to light. And it is a very condemnable act, which is also why we are saddened that the first amendment did not pass, that was handed in by the United States. And we wish to solve this with later amendments, however.
Are there any more points in the House? United States?
So the delegate of Italy was criticizing the naivety of the UK, but still is naive, as naive as she was, or even worse. And so, could you explain another time why you think this amendment is worse, or is bad?
Allow us then to re-explain it perhaps in a bit different formulation. First of all, our original argument why we thought this amendment should not pass is because we believe that nations will go to a certain extent to put these journalists from other countries in even greater danger, so that the other nations from which they originally come from will withdraw these journalists so they can no longer find out the truth. Since this amendment suggests that countries that have deployed, or of whom journalists have gone to other nations in order to do their journalism things there, to withdraw them if they are in dangerous locations. However, we argued as a counter-argument that these nations to which the journalists have gone will put these journalists in danger on purpose so that they can withdraw. The delegate of the UK replied to this that if this will be done, if nations will put journalists of other countries in danger on purpose, the original countries will notice this. However, we disagree because that's incredibly naive. We instead believe that these nations will go to any extent to still put these journalists in danger, yet still be able to hide it legally, between quotation mark, of course. And therefore we believe that it is a pipe dream rather than a realistic wish.
Since you just opened yourself to 4 points of information, we suggest you yield the floor to 2 chairs.
So we yield it.
Thank you. We are now in time against this amendment to the second degree. You may. Any objections? So we will now be moving into voting procedure. We will now be moving to voting procedure. Note passing is suspended. All delegates wishing to vote in favor of this amendment to the second degree, please raise your placards high now. 6. You may lower. All delegates wishing to vote against this amendment to the second degree, please raise your placards. You may lower your placards.
The delegation of China imposes the
Okay, since this amendment has been vetoed, it will not.
Second degree. Veto, the use of veto rights by the delegation of China. She has not
Yes,
spoken
please.
against the amendment to the second degree.
Objection. Objection. Veto the objection.
Granted.
The objection or the...
No.
The explanation of your
The explain.
We will simply explain why we haven't spoken against that is because we have been infected by the flu and our voice has been very cracked up. So that is pretty much why I didn't, why we didn't explain. Can't do that, man. Can't do that right now.
Okay.
That is why we haven't spoken about not agreeing to this statement.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. So we will now return to the amendment as it states. Any objections?
Russia, no objection. Okay.
No objections? No objections? Okay. We're done. Müssen wir nicht mehr abstimmen, ne? Well then. Well then the amendment has been tabled.
We have
Motion
one.
to call upon an expert
Motion to
explain
move
the
into
merits
full
of this
procedure
topic.
on the
We would
resolution.
like to suggest Benjamin.
Denied.
Motion to fulfill the decision made by the chairs.
Denied. We will now be order please. Order please. We will now be entertaining an amendment handed in by Italy. Italy, please take the floor. Thank you.
This amendment to implement an oath of truth that journalists have to take internationally, which is similar in nature to the doctor's oath they have to take before they graduate. Since the oath of truth, we believe, will ensure a certain degree of truthfulness that these journalists will adhere to, since it has been proven multiple times that the doctor's oath also has a considerable effect on those who aspire to become a doctor, because it will not only deter those who aspire to become a doctor for the wrong purposes, it will also keep those who do the wrong things as a doctor from doing the wrong things. So we believe, although it might be rather trivial in nature, it will still have a positive effect on the civilians and those who aspire to become journalists. Thank you.
Thank you, delegates. Are you open to any points of information?
Any and all.
Are there any such in the house? Please raise your placards high. UK followed by Russia, followed by Iran.
How is the delegate of Italy planning to deal on journalists who have spread false information but did really not know that at this point? The delegation might know that it's sometimes possible to make a mistake, and what are the sanctions for breaking the oath of truth by accident?
By accident? Oh, that is a very interesting point actually the United Kingdom brings in, since it also happens with the doctor's oath that doctors break the oath by accident. And although breaking the oath is technically punishable for doctors, both legally and officially, internationally, since the doctor's oath is such an important moral rule that doctors have to adhere to, since if it is not adhered to, well, it's obvious that will have very dangerous effects. The same, we think, applies to journalism, that it is up to the local courts to decide how these journalists will be dealt with. And if it is a problem bigger than that, then it can be dealt upon later. Yeah.
Request for follow-up.
Granted.
Doesn't the delegate agree that an oath of truth for journalists and a doctor's oath are two very different things? As doctors, they operate, they do things in the moment, and journalists collect evidence and base their stories on that evidence. Now, doesn't the delegate agree that if a journalist is supplied with false evidence, which is not their fault, they shouldn't be punished for spreading that?
Then it seems as though we misunderstood the delegate's original comment. If they are given false evidence and they have no reason to suspect this evidence, because if they do have a reason to suspect this evidence, they should, in our opinion. But let's say they do not, then we believe it is completely out of their own hands, that they have nothing to do with it. This doctors, and although we do see the point of the delegates saying that the doctor's oath and an oath of truth might be two different things, and yes, they are different things. However, we still believe they are similar in nature, that those who practice the certain field will do their best in order to ensure to adhere to human integrity and morals that have been set out for the field.
Denied.
My question has been answered.
Doesn't the delegation of Italy believe that introducing some kind of oath of truth would make journalists seem more trustworthy, and they therefore have more capability of spreading fake news, which wouldn't be expected to be fake news?
Although they would seem more trustworthy in some people's eye, it's not as though they will not be punished for spreading fake news. If anything, since they have now given their consent and their acceptance of the rules laid out for journalists, that they are obliged to not create false evidence themselves, and that they are obliged to spread the truth rather than to spread propaganda which is riddled with lies and false information, which will be included in the oath, of course. We believe that if they take this oath, they give a certain form of consent and acceptance of these rules, and therefore can be punished if they do not adhere to these rules, since that's a natural consequence. It's the same with the doctor's oath. They have agreed to the rules, so if they do not adhere to them, they will be punished accordingly. And we believe it's the same with journalists, so if anything, it gives the capability to governments and other such organizations, the ability to punish the journalists if they do not adhere to the oath on purpose in order to spread their own ideology or ideas.
Is the delegation of Italy aware that implementing this amendment will be very contradictory to the right freedom of press?
Well, yes, there is a freedom of press, but that does not mean we cannot let them take an oath to report the truth at all times, since it does not infringe the freedom of the press. If an article is riddled with lies and false information, and they portray this as a truth, this is already punishable. The oath of truth simply serves to legitimize this to an even larger degree. So we do not see how this infringes the journalist's rights and the freedom of press. We rather think, if anything, it will encourage and endorse the freedom of press, since to allow those who spread the truth to truly spread the truth, since it will also be, in a way, certified to be the truth.
Are there any more points in the house? Russia.
So more often than journalists actually producing fake news themselves, it's very often the case that nations manipulate their news and spread fake news through them. And could you explain how an oath of truth would stop that, since this is the main source of fake news actually?
The delegate of Russia brings forward a very important point as well, because this applies more to individuals rather than entire governments who manipulate the entire flow of news. And it is harder to punish an entire government, and of course we cannot let an entire government take an oath of truth, so to speak. And that's why we simply suggest that, although it may be trivial to introduce this oath of truth, to ensure just a bit more, even if it's a couple of percent, even if it's nearly nothing, even if it's just a little bit of improvement, we still think it is worth introducing this oath of truth, since in our opinion it will have no negative effect, so it cannot hurt to introduce it, although we do understand, of course, it will not solve every problem, especially if it's on a large scale like the Russian Federation has mentioned.
Are there any more points in the house? Iraq, you've been recognized.
Does the delegation of Italy believe that this oath of truth can be misused by dictators, saying that the truth is very different than what the journalists are writing? Like, what body is going to control what the truth really is?
Although the delegate of Iraq brings forward a very good point as well, and we are actually would first like to express our gratitude to the delegates for bringing forward such great points, but allow us to answer the actual question. We do understand that there is no consensus on objective truth when it comes to articles. It's hard to fully realize, to fully ensure that the truth written, or the truth between quotation marks, written in these articles is the actual objective truth, and dictators might use this information to punish them. That's why we think that the journalists should be, that perhaps a new organ or something like that could be found within the United Nations, which is made up of professionals to ensure that there's objective truth. Of course, this only applies to articles that claim to report the objective truth. When we are talking about subjective articles, on the other hand, they are subjective. We cannot deny these subjective articles to be expressed, because, as the delegation of Germany has also said, it would infringe the freedom of press. So only those that claim to completely be foolproof against any lies or false information will have to fall under the oath of truth, in our opinion.
Are there any more points in the House? Seeing as there are none, we suggest you yield the floor back to the chairs.
So we yield.
Thank you. We are now in time in favor of this amendment. Are there any delegations wishing to take the floor in favor? Any objections? Are there any delegations wishing to speak in against this amendment? Egypt, please take the floor.
Honorable chairs, dear delegates. First of all, we would like to point out that the second part of this amendment, where it states that the oath of truth will be similar to a doctor's oath, is a complete irrelevant similarity, because the doctor's oath actually states that doctors cannot tamper with medical confidentiality, which means that they cannot spread any information about their patients. And it also states that they have to stay true to the working ethics, meaning that they cannot do anything that doesn't abide to the doctor's rules. The oath of truth, according to the delegate of Italy, simply states that the journalists have to confirm that they are telling the truth. Therefore, this similarity doesn't make any sense. We also would like to point out that the oath of truth has a lot of loopholes in it. Like the delegation of Italy, but also the delegation of the United Kingdom said, sometimes journalists are provided with evidence that is not true, and they will report it. But however, we do believe that once a journalist is caught spreading information that is not true, it will be very easy for them to say that they got the information somewhere else, and therefore they will not be punished for a crime that they did commit. Thank you.
Thank you, delegate. Are you open to any points of information?
Any and all.
Are there? Granted.
Doctor's oath, since they are both for those aspiring to pursue a career in these fields. Although they might not be similar in their content, they are similar in nature, as we have specified in the amendment, in the sense that those who aspire to become, to truly pursue a career in this field, will have to keep themselves to certain moral rules and certain ethics, as the delegation has mentioned, of their own field. Furthermore, the delegate also mentioned about those journalists simply claiming that they have been provided false information, and that's also why we believe that the oath of truth should perhaps include a rule that they have to specify the sources of the information, and so that it can be confirmed on a later date whether they actually got this information from the sources they have specified, whether this was a lie or not.
While we do agree with the points that the delegation of Italy has made about the sources of this news, however, we are wondering we are doubting whether it will be we will be able to actually check with the sources upon whether they did provide the journalists with the news, because once it comes out that the news is fake, it's most likely that these sources will not admit that they actually provided the journalists with this news.
Okay. Are there any more points in the House? Seeing as there are none, we suggest you yield the floor back to the chairs. Thank you. We are currently in time against this amendment. Are there any more delegations wishing to speak against this amendment? UK, please take the floor.
Honorable chairs, dear delegates, we as delegation of the UK believe that it is already pointed out why this is not a solid amendment. We would like to say that it is already expected from a journalist to speak the truth. There are already sanctions for journalists who do not, and we believe that an oath of truth, as many delegates have already pointed out, will just find new ways for dictators to regulate the news coming from their country. And we would also like to add that although they are similar in nature, the oath of truth and the doctor's oath, furthermore, they have not to anything. They are not similar. So although there are a lot of things that are similar in nature but are not relevant to each other, and that's why we think that the delegation of Italy did want to make a good point, but just simply has failed to do so, and that's why we.
Rise and state your point.
That they are not similar, and we have never said they are similar. We have specified they are similar in nature to the doctor's oath. This implying that they simply serve a similar function, not that their contents are similar in any way or form. And we are tired of hearing arguments about the oath. Yes, we understand they are not similar, but we have never claimed they are. So, although we do respect the other points that it puts forward.
Okay. We would like to say to the delegate that we pointed out that they are not similar. We know that it says similar in nature. However, other delegates might see this as a misconception and think they are similar. That's why we wanted to point this out. We're further not attacking the delegate. Yeah.
Thank you, delegate. Are you open to any points of
Any
information?
at all.
Are there any such in the House? Please raise your placards high. Seeing as there are none, we suggest you yield the floor to the chairs. Thank you. Are there any more delegations wishing to speak against this amendment? Please raise your placards.
Motion to table the amendment. Friendly table.
Friendly table. Are there any objections?
Second. Nobody's stopping. Motion to read gossip bomb. Second.
Since the gossip box is not full enough to split it into two parts, we will. Okay, as a teaser, we will read out 5 gossips today and the rest tomorrow.
Do you know how many gossips are in there?
Das kommt morgen dazu.
Ja, ist doch egal, da haben wir morgen mehr zu lesen. Müssen wir morgen kein extra Thema machen.